business line on you? Oh my
we,
God, that's
we
like
have so many Cerebral Valley hats now that I just sort of, my current branding is whatever the latest hat from Cerebral Valley was.
wow. So talking about Cerebral Valley, okay, so I want to start with like I really respect what you guys have built. Like I feel like building a media company is fucking hard, and like I should not curse on my own show, but anyway, so I think you're a professional, man. Like, you know, you work at the New York Times, Bloomberg, and the Information. Like, you literally have my dream resume if I could actually be a journalist. But
Thank you. That's
I
very
want to
nice of
know,
you.
okay, so I want to know more about like, okay, so let's start with like, you know, why do you want to be a journalist? Obviously, you know, like not everyone wants to be that, but
Yeah, I mean, I was born in York, Pennsylvania, and then my parents divorced, and I was sort of abruptly moved to Macon, Georgia. And it just so happened that my public elementary school in Macon, Georgia, had a sort of closed circuit TV news show run by like a local TV anchor once a week. And so I fell into that and like really took to it. And so I was sort of on air asking questions, and I realized, fourth or fifth grade, that it's like, oh man, I get to get out of class. I get to ask, the superintendent, the principal, whatever I want. Like it was just sort of, a very freeing experience. That's sort of how I fit in a new school. So I think I've been very fortunate in that I saw, an appealing profession really, really early on in life, which then lets you sort of say, okay, I clearly want to do this thing. Like, let me take this step and then this step and then this step. And obviously, it's been really hard to get into journalism. And so I think having that sense
you
of
have
this
the
is the
golden
plan
resume.
helped me a lot.
It's a golden resume though. Like, I feel like I would not like, I don't know, like I feel like it's so hard to get into one of these publications.
Yeah, I mean, my first, I interned at the Macon Telegraph, my hometown newspaper, the summer before I went to college. And then, even, I was at the Harvard Crimson. I didn't get like some amazing internship that first summer as a freshman. I went back to the Macon Telegraph, which was a great internship, and I learned a lot from them, honestly. And then I went, to the Sun Sentinel. I climbed up like Southern newspapers up sort of the hierarchy, and, the Tampa Bay Times is one of the most respected regional newspapers, and that got me to New York Times internship. And so, yeah, it was sort of, one foot in front of the other for a long time. And then, sort of my adult professional career, you get that sort of, I don't know, linear climbing the hierarchy isn't everything it's cracked up to be. And that's where things sort of change.
Wow. I feel like I just like I don't know if I could stand being in the journalism for that long because okay, let's talk about what is journalism. Like so I know that I feel like you differentiate you between like you and like the general public solo creators are like you're actually professionally trained. Train me.
Yeah, I know. Well, so I've been joking on a lot of these podcasts that like I'd rather be seen as a creator or an influencer who's exceeding expectations than sort of the impossible standards that journalists, get held to. So in some ways I try not to wear, I mean, I'm a journalist. Like I do a lot of the same stuff, checking a lot of, I'm reporting a very intense story at the moment. It's a lot of fact checking, a lot of details.
So break it down. I want to know more about like how does a professional journalism like fact check? Like I have like reporter call me to fact check some other stuff, but I was like, wow, that's a lot of details that you want to cover. Like, how do you know if the other person was saying the truth? I could just be completely blunt lying, and then
it's a lot of triangulating. So it's like you give me your version of accounts, somebody else gives me theirs. I go back to you. Who's more transparent? Who can produce like examples? Whose examples hold up when you take them to other people? Who feels like they have a real axe to grind, and who feels more neutral? So it's what?
It's a vibe check, basically.
Well, yeah. You sort of like, well, I mean, obviously, if somebody's dishonest to you or doesn't, or really omits something key, you're a little more suspect of what they're saying. If somebody's really like open and transparent, you're like, oh, this is somebody who I can trust to when there's more of a dispute. Obviously, people are willing to say things on the record. You trust that even more. People who can give you specific, on this date, this thing happened, and so it's just sort of running it down and ultimately like pressure testing what one person says against the other. Because even people who are disputing a lot of things, they still have to, if they want to convince people, they have to live in the world of reality. And so a lot of people who are on totally opposite sides of an issue still end up agreeing on 90% of the facts. And then you're sort of like trying to figure out, and sometimes, you're saying, well, one view of what happened was this, and one view of what happened was that. And ultimately I'm not able to sort of tell the reader which is which, and sort of give them as much information as I can.
For sure. Okay, so another question is like, okay, you write these newsletters and they're super intense. And like, how do you like, okay, first of all, like I feel like the professional journalism or like professional journalists background people always go after the big brands. Like, and then like, is the big brands actually like number one? Like, I mean, I'm sure it drives traffic. I don't know why. Like, I'm like,
sorry, big brands like writing about OpenAI or working for big media brands?
OpenAI. Like, so like
yeah.
wrote about like,
I mean, I need to know what like the narrative is. It's sort of like, I always joked, even at Bloomberg, which is, where I worked for 6 years, which is very serious financial journalism. It's like, we didn't cover companies proportionate to their market cap. I was like one of the star tech reporters, and I was covering Uber. I wasn't covering Oracle. Oracle wasn't the sexy story, even though it was a bigger company. People ultimately, even very sophisticated business people, sort of know this is the sort of company of the moment. This is where we're going to hash out a lot of the like test case cultural issues. And so, I'm totally, you need to write stories that are about people and companies that matter. I mean, right now, I'm working on stories about obscure companies that get, it's sort of, there's sort of a mix of things. It's like, how well known is the thing I'm writing about, and how crazy is the story about it? And certainly story can be crazy enough that you'll write about something nobody's ever heard of, but it's sort of a sliding scale. And I think you develop a sense of what's your audience interested in, and where is there something like fresh and differentiated to say that people would listen to.
For sure. Okay, so do you have the story like okay, so walk me through the process. Like for example, let's say you are trying to uncover a story, let's say at CS or something. Like you want to try to uncover NVIDIA. I don't know. Like just thinking about any company. Like who do you talk to? And then like
some of my best reporting last year was on Chamath Palihapitiya, who's like, a co-host of All In and had run this venture firm, Social Capital. And I'd profiled All In. And so I did 2 big stories on him. The first was about the SPAC debacles. He helped take all these companies public, and then they lost a lot of money, and it was, consumer investors got sort of screwed. Honestly, that story was there for the taking. It was just sort of putting the pieces together. I wrote it because Chamath started tweeting like, I'm in the arena, and just being really braggadocious on Twitter. And so the whole frame of the story, which, I do admit, I'm sort of doing like reported columns, was like, man, Chamath, like I almost let this go. Like it was sort of so transparent that you got over on everybody. But like, come on, now you're like dancing on like retail's grave, basically, when they lost money on the thing you told them to invest in. So that was one. And, I had a lot of details. And so then I like, once I know, okay, there's something here, then I go to sources. Obviously I can't really talk about them, but people who sort of were involved, close to it, know how to, get, know what happened, and try and get sort of details about how much he made and what's he said. And that was the first story. And then the second was about, Chamath's sort of broken professional relationships. And there, like an old lawyer of his had posted something bragging about winning like this contentious, like legal fight with some of his former partners. And then I talked to people around it. And, to some degree, like these stories are possible because these people piss so many people off in their wake that, you're able to find some people are willing to tell you what happened. And obviously I go to Chamath and say, I'm writing this story. Like, do you want to comment? And he didn't really engage. I mean, I think he must know, like, SPAC thing happened. His attitude is sort of, I guess you break some eggs. But anyway, that's an example.
Well, I feel like it's so bold that like if let's say not I personally, okay, if someone work at like a Bloomberg, I think that's fine because like it's like a big brand, like no one's gonna come after you. They're gonna go after Bloomberg. But if like as an individual, it's like really bold to go after.
yeah. You're like, this seems risky. I mean, I am definitely Silicon Valley, I think at its best, believes people should stand on their own reputations, that you can start a startup and you don't need to work for like the big company to validate that you have an interesting idea. And I believe that, and I think I've gotten a lot of support in Silicon Valley. So I guess I am cocky enough to believe that as long as I act ethically and do the right thing, not that nobody will ever come after me, I'm sure the day will come, but that I have enough like goodwill and friends in the industry that if like the day ever came, people would come to my defense and like I'd figure it out. And like, I've got Substack has helped me like lawyer a story about Palantir at one point, and I keep all sort of the same principles that I had at Bloomberg, but yeah, it's the business. I don't know. I like it. I'm willing. I guess I'm, doing journalism without sort of some of the safety net I had before, but means that I can write directly for my audience. I'm freer to make my own decisions and certainly get more directly the credit for my work.
I wonder, so like, how do you really put together obviously the story that you mentioned are like having some really major,
yeah, I'm not doing those stories every week, obviously.
Yeah, but like I feel like it's really hard to think about like a storyline. So like there's not like, I mean, maybe I'm just not a drama digger. Like I don't really know what's like the drama here, but like I feel like a lot of, for example, like how do you report on some stuff like a random tech innovation like flying ship? Like these flying ships, I don't understand like why ship need to be flying. Isn't that supposed to be a plane? But anyway, so like how do you report some random stuff that at CES?
I mean, so we'll do like sector pieces. I hired last year in January, Madeline Renbarger, who had been a Business Insider. So she'll do like, oh, here are the top robotics companies. And honestly, a lot of what we're trying to do at Newcomer is help people make money in startups and venture capital, right? For the core VC and startup audience, like what are the companies? We really want to know, as much as I like to talk about sort of the more investigative thing, we're just as happy to be like, I broke the news that Be Real had raised a seed in Series A before the company was super hot. I wish it had gone on to become really successful. But it's like, we love to know this is a company that Silicon Valley thinks is really important before everybody else knows. So I guess the principle number one is like, listen to our sources, talk to people, get advice from people. And the other one is just sort of look at a space, try to be organized about it, just like you were a venture associate saying, what are all the robotics companies? If you pick a space and sort of dig into it, then you talk to the investors and figure out why they're excited. And again, like I was talking about sourcing earlier, it's like, sure, everybody might talk their book, but what's the company that's not in their portfolio that they're excited about? And that's a good way to then figure out, okay, these are the companies that everyone's excited about, whether they're an investor or not.
But like, how do you create a storyline though? Like, oh, by the way, hi Samuel. I want to say hi to the audience. So I want to know more about like, how do you even create a storyline? Because you can't make stuff up out of nothing. Of course, let's say I'm an investor and I like did not invest in Starbucks coffee. Like, I'm gonna talk about Starbucks coffee, and then what is the story there? Like, it's just like, oh wow, investors are happy about Starbucks coffee. Like, I don't think anyone's gonna
Right.
like
I mean, yeah, it needs to be,
rage.
no, I mean, it needs to be sort of something unexpected. It's like more money than we've ever seen before. It represents, some new idea. Yeah, I mean, it's the challenge of like storytelling fundamentally. I mean, what I think one thing we're trying to do well is, there are a lot of great storytellers who prefer to write about, the life and culture and write books and novels. Like, I think why I'm able to sort of make money as sort of a storyteller is like we're applying it to business. So, and we're we have to be very rigorous about the facts and reality, but it is still finding like either a person story where there's interesting like conflict or somebody's doing something novel, or often for us like a money story, which is just, wow, people are risking a lot of money on this. Those are usually, people and money give you plenty of like conflicts to try and build a story around.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, so I want to talk about like something obviously you built your brand out like, which is the conference, right? So like I feel like the conference is like an iconic moment that like, um Okay, let's talk about like, okay, so I can't believe you put together the conference for in like 6 weeks. So,
Yeah,
I think
that's true.
all
So
like literally all the biggest people just in tax form. Okay, teach me how. And then like
it,
also, like, do you feel like the Bloomberg thing transformed? Like, I feel like it really like, I think you really prove that like the people would come for you, not like the Bloomberg title. So like, I guess like how do you kind of like transfer the relationship from like a big brand to like yourself? Because that's like some I really love that you
yeah.
succeeded in it and then
A couple quick stories to try to answer that. First, I was the first employee at the Information before Jessica Lesson had even given it a name. So I was introducing myself as a no-name reporter, being like, "Hi, I work for former Wall Street Journal reporter Jessica Lesson, who had just changed her last name from
yeah, you're
Vassalera." And sort of you sort of realize like, okay, this we're sort of it's building a brand off her. I was building my own brand. You realize you can like start from no real corporate brand. And then I launched the Substack in November 2020, and so there I'd already run the test case of will people sort of cooperate with me without the Bloomberg, and Bill Gurley and Dara Khosrowshahi and Tony Xu gave me interviews pretty early on. So Silicon Valley very supportive of a new thing. And then doing the event, so we did our first Cerebral Valley now 2 years ago. So March, not last year, but the year before, in March. And man, time has become a blur. I feel like whenever you start the new year, it's like, what year is this? But so I had access to a friend's office. They were going to co-host the event with me. This company, Volley, two of my best friends are the co-founders. We were actually all going to my bachelor party in California. I'm based in New York. It's like, oh, flying out, we should do a little business while I'm there, expense the flights, And they had an office. Their employees don't come in on a Thursday. And so I think it was just so low stakes. It was like, oh, we'll do a half day thing. And then I started texting people, and Ahmad at Stability, said yes in like 30 minutes, and Bucky at Kleiner Perkins and Miles Grimshaw, who was at Benchmark. And so it just felt like, oh man, we're getting people. I think it helped that we were super early. The sort of traditional media hadn't built up generative AI events. There was just appetite, and it was just like personal relationships. And then when you have the speakers, you get the attendees. And so that was just like lightning in a bottle. We were super, it was just, everything went right. That, it was such a great event. And then we did a much more buttoned up version with Vinod Khosla and Reid Hoffman at SF Jazz that November. And last year we did one in New York, and then we just did one again in November in San Francisco. And so it's become, it's invite only. People have to apply. We're really trying to keep it like 50% startup founders in AI. And so it's, just keeping the quality high, and then sharing what happens in the newsletter with the media and on YouTube gives it a longer reach. And so, yeah, we've been really lucky there, and that's powering the business. And now we're thinking this year, what other sort of conference brands can we develop?
For sure. I want to know more about like I feel like obviously it takes like many years to like build these relationships, but what's your kind of like personal CRM kind of look like? You may have like a very different approach than like many other creators, just because I feel like you would like you have a perspective on stuff, but I wonder how do you like DM people for hey, like I'm in San Francisco, you want to grab coffee, or like what's the vibe here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like text and Signal are two of the most important. Twitter DMs, I use like Roam for note taking. I use ChatGPT for my to-do list. Like I'll go in and have sort of an updated like here's my I'll just tell it like here's my calendar. I try to keep it in the same thread as the day before, and then we sort of just nice to be able to like talk, and it can check things off, and it does formatting. But I'm pretty like lo-fi, it's just like a lot of it is text wherever people are. I think a good reporter, it's like I'm constantly sitting here being like, was it on WhatsApp, or do we DM? Sometimes people are on Telegram, These are the small ball problems of reporters, but I'm on all the messaging platforms because you just want to be easy to reach. And yeah, so it's just messaging people, writing up in stories, keeping track of your calendar. But I'm not one of these super sophisticated like organization people.
I mean, I feel like the thing is like if I get a text from you, I will be like partially thrilled and partially like sudden just because I'm like, oh God, like what do I need to comment on this time? Like it's gonna be like me throwing shade on someone or whatever during these conversations. Oh, but on the other hand, it's like, wow, my name is gonna be mentioned by.
Well, a lot of times you're not. I try to do like so much of my reporting anonymously. I want to write in the next couple of weeks a piece, like just explain. I think I need to like talk about our ethics a little bit with all the events, and I think like explain how I do reporting. I'm always trying to strike a balance. It's interesting. Like people want to talk about sort of the meta story, the making of journalism, and my readers like it. But at the same time, I feel like, I need to keep the right ratio of writing about other people and the actual like subject matter of tech relative to how much I talk about like how we think about things. But anyway, that's a post. Once I've written a couple more tech stories I want to send out.
Okay, so let's talk about the business part just because I feel like you're also a successful business person. I think there's like the journalism stuff.
Yeah.
I think you're apparently like, I mean, I really appreciate your like transparency on the internet about like,
build in public. Yeah.
So I wonder when it comes to like positioning yourself, like obviously you guys have like a lot of really readers like that are like in big firms and blah blah blah. But I think a lot of people would not be able to sell it really well, but obviously you sell it like decently well. So like I wonder, how do you think about like the psychology of like people buying these things, like buying ads from you as well, or like participating in the event as well? So how do you curate the events? Because I know that you guys have like a form people fill out, but like I think it's like it's so hard to like, I mean, like people always flake, you always have to have double of the people to like be there, and then charging them a price like $800 to
Right.
like $1,600 or $150. Like, how do you like make sure that people will pay? Because Silicon Valley, yeah, everything is free. So
yeah, I mean, to give sort of top line, I did a 4-year update last year where I said we generated more than 2 million in revenue and $1 million in profit. So that's the transparency part. I mean, I think in terms of disclosure, it's just a matter of like you realize covering startups and small companies that like you need to differentiate from the big guys by doing things differently. And so one thing you can do is be more transparent, which gets people to pay attention. Also, I've built this business off cash flows, which is great for ownership, but not necessarily great for PR about the business, because unfortunately, enabled by people like me, humans love to read about big funding rounds more than they necessarily are able to assess businesses and decide if they're good. So given we haven't raised outside capital, I sort of need to produce the financials to prove to people, oh yeah, this is a real business. You should take us seriously as a business. And, we're trying to hire right now an account executive, our founding account executive, and a very senior reporter. So, it's important for those people to understand, oh, this is like a good growing business. Yeah, I mean, then the mix of revenue, I guess, which I've talked about, is basically, I don't know, it's like more than 75% of the revenue is from events. So events have become a huge part of the business. Subscriptions are a big chunk, and then we run some sponsorships in the newsletter.
When I hear about how much your podcast charge, my jaw drops. But are you going after the acquired podcast now? I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, our podcast is like, the thing about our podcast ads, which we run those ads in the newsletter. The newsletter has more than 100,000 readers. Right. And also, our readers are sincerely like the top GPs at a lot of these firms, startup founders. I feel like the challenge, if anything, we have is that I'm so focused on the inside Silicon Valley story that I'm much more like, well, does the actual CEO read this? Are the right people reading this? Then can I build like huge audience numbers so that people who are sponsors feel like they're getting clicks?
But like the sponsor will always ask you, what's your download number. And like,
Right. Yeah. We share some of that, but that's why events have worked so well, because it's like they can see who's there. They get it. I feel
right.
like event people really understand it. It's like, oh, it's about these people and, some of the coverage and stuff, but
Yeah.
it's not an eyeball game.
Okay. Another question is, I feel like the event business is like also cash intensive. Like, okay, you have to just get like a free venue, or your entire thing is gonna go to like, I mean, not entire thing, but like a lot of them will go to the venue, and then food and drinks and like everything else. And like, if you charge ticket in San Francisco, everything else is free. And like you're competing with like all the VC firms.
Yeah, I mean, since our first event, I mean, this is where it's a little braggy. We've been very lucky, but yeah, I mean, since our first event, we've paid for all the event spaces. Honestly, like, don't tell our vendors, but we're often trying to pay as much as we can, because we want to get the best quality. We want top quality more than anything.
Right.
If you're going to charge a lot for tickets, you're going to charge a lot for your sponsors. Like I'm always like, what's the best food we can get like reasonably here? So it's not really for us like a cost cutting effort on the events. It's much more like, let's spend money to make money, and then charge a lot. We have premium prices like a real media brand for sponsorships, because I think one thing that's been amazing is the, HP, Oracle, Samsung, big companies have gotten pretty early on that this is like a real thing. And so they're not waiting for us to become Axios to do great sponsorship deals with us. They've been in since the early days and are just like growing with us. And so, yeah, again, Silicon Valley's willingness and excitement, honestly, to work with new brands has helped us a lot, because they're game to see, oh, this is something new and cool. Let's like jump on board.
I wonder, but like, how, I guess, who would be the type of profile that you're targeting for the sponsor? Like, for example, let's say, big tech company typically have like multiple departments, right? There's like, a lot of BD people trying to get new business, and then there's like the marketing people. Would you go after marketing, or would you go after like the product, or like the I guess like the business people? And would you say like, are they inbounding you, or like, also a lot of times like, how do you even like upsell people? Just because like it's like they gave you like a really small price and then you negotiate up, or you gave them a range. Like, I mean, I hear from like all the random different creators about these like tips on like.
Well, we have like, a pretty credit, I have a business guy, Riley Kinsella, who's like doing much more of the sponsorship selling than I am at this point. So don't give me too much credit. But I mean, basically we have a presentation with prices. We have historic prices. So we increase them a certain amount each year based on demand. I mean, we have certain sponsor slots that are more appealing. I mean, again, direct relationships matter, especially, the venture funds end up being very key to our events. Even when they're not sponsoring, they suggest a lot of founders. Like, I think part of what the value Newcomer and like the media can provide is that even in this world where, VCs are trying to get everyone to pay attention to their own content, founders want sort of a neutral ground. And so we listen to all the VCs, we take their opinions on who's cool, and they help us out a lot. And so then some of them co-host dinners with us. So then they play an even bigger role in what founders are there. And that, we succeed if we get the best founders there, and VCs want to be around the best founders. So it ends up being very synergistic. So we rely on the VCs, the big companies can afford the sort of top tier sponsorships. And so it's a mix of big tech corporates that get it and have sort of a mix of, missions. Some of them want to sell to startups. Some of them want to be top of mind. We're also in front of media, and then venture firms that want to be synonymous with AI and also want sort of the excuse we provide to have all these touch points with founders.
For sure. So how do you examine the budget? Like, just because like, do you just literally go after the biggest that you could get, or like do you position as like, oh, let's go after whatever it's normal? Like, because in the media industry, is there like a standard guideline? Just because I think every media, like the Fortune have the Fortune Summit or whatever, like the Forbes thing, like everything has some sort of like different. Maybe I don't.
You're talking about pricing right now, or?
Yeah, pricing. Like, how do you?
I mean, I think it's so arbitrary. I don't know. Talking to most business people, I feel like, people pull prices out of like thin air, and then, you sort of like have a price. Our first prices were pretty arbitrary. Like, what do we think we can charge? And then you're like, wow, people are really excited for this one. It sells out immediately. We should raise the price. And this sponsor slot clearly is hard to sell. So do we need to shift some of the perks to this one, lower the price? So, I mean, yeah, setting the price the first time is very hard. Like our ticket prices the first time, I forget what we charged, 1,200 maybe, but like we set the same price for founders and VCs and we refused to change it. But like, that was clearly a mistake. All our events since, we charge VCs like $1 bazillion, like 1,600. And then we charge founders like 150, because we want founders there. Founders, our dream attendee is like the person who's raised a Series A that hasn't been announced from Sequoia, and so they have money, but they're not blowing it on conferences. So, you have to charge them something because you want them to show up. And if you charge them nothing, then they're too chill about it. So it's important to have some price, but yeah, we want some investors, but not too many investors. So we charge them a lot. We want as many great founders as we can get. So we charge them less. And that's been the strategy. And, we make money from tickets, but sponsors matter the most.
For sure. I wonder, so like, but as you mentioned, let's say the the Sequoia unannounced Series A guys, like wouldn't they just like go to like, I mean, what, like, I guess like why would they pay something to go to something? Obviously you have to demonstrate the value, but like,
I know some people don't get it and some people do. I mean, it's for the Series A. I mean, first of all, people have met founders at Cerebral Valley. Our claim to fame, which I'm surprised I haven't bragged about yet on this podcast, is that Databricks bought Mosaic ML after meeting them at our event, our first event. It was a $1.4 billion deal, basically. And, Fortune and Business Insider have written about how, they really did like meet at the event and then start having deal talks and it became a deal. So, somebody at one of the major public investors put like $1 billion to work in Fidelity after one of our events, made a bunch of money. Like people are making money off these events and they're doing deals. And honestly, like more and more what we're expressly trying to do is like build connections with people. And so it's just like, sure, it costs a little money and yeah, AI people are meeting up with each other, but this is just like an extremely time efficient way, in a neutral way. That's not like, oh, this isn't all like Andreessen's people that they want us to meet. It is neutral across VCs. You can meet other founders. You can meet VCs. I mean, Ali Goetze was, at Databricks was sitting there doing all his reporter meetings after his talk at our last event. It's like an efficient way to, to catch up with people. And so, yeah, that's where, it's just like, we're good at curating the right people so that it's super valuable and these people's time is valuable. And so they're willing to spend, a little bit of money for them essentially to have a day loaded with great connections.
For sure. But like, let's say before the first time, like obviously after the first time people say great things about your events, but let's say before the track record exists, why would they trust you?
Speakers. I mean, yeah, I'm using my relationship to get speakers. Mm-hmm. And then those speakers market themselves. It's like people want to hear from them. And so then you use one good speaker to get the next. Mm-hmm. Then once you have good speakers, you get good sponsors, and then you get good attendees. I mean, sometimes you have to really like, we do a lot of like direct outreach, like I'm saying, it's even though we have applications, we have 100,000 person audience, that another part of our success is that we have a great marketing engine. Basically, we're not spending money on Facebook ads to get people to come because I have this audience that gets what I'm about. And as an influencer, when you're selling your own product, you actually believe in it. So you're passionate. The ads are better. It's like, oh, this is something great. I'm doing it. And your audience isn't like, oh, why are there so many ads? They're like, oh, great. This is like Eric's thing. We like Eric. If this is how he's making money, like Godspeed. The other thing I'll say, which again, like, I mean, you're in VC, so you can do some of this stuff, but we have a huge advantage because I feel like people in venture want people to make money. They're like, oh, great. Like, especially in media, it's like, oh, build a successful media business. Like, I love it. So honestly, even like when our sponsors are like, man, you're really like asking for the top price here. At the same time, they want us to succeed. And so they get it. They sort of want me to play the capitalist, which is like, well, this is what the market is saying the price is. So we'd love to have you, but we have somebody else who's willing to pay a higher price. And so honestly, people are fine with us being, market making capitalists.
I've heard great things from people about like your conference, and obviously people get a lot of value. And I want to maybe like double click on the curated piece, just because like you mentioned about like, let's say get the top VC firm to tell you who is like the up and coming founders, but how do you kind of like scale the process? Just because like you're in your conference, like there's a lot of people. Obviously, like I think it was like a few weeks ago, and then everyone was posting about it. Like it was end of November. I was like I hosted a dinner, and then there were like people talking about it, obviously.
Nice.
And yeah. Free ads, you can like post little clips. But anyway, so yeah, so like a lot of people post about it. Like how do you do it, like the outreach at scale? Because let's say do you have like a CRM to be like, hey, here's like our top 10 VC firm, like our BFFs there, like can like maybe send out them like
I mean, but if it's 10 people you can remember. I mean, we have Google Docs and stuff, and like we almost spent $1 bazillion on HubSpot. And then I was like to my team, I was like, why? Like, what are we going to do here? And I just end up really being on the side of like manual. It's like we're emailing people we know. We have a list, it's a 200 to 350 person event basically, depending on which one. Excuse me. And like you could definitely remember, you write down all your speakers. I just don't think it's like such a big universe that you can't keep track of it. So no amazing CRM stuff. I'm sure, my business and events person would say, well, we have the ticketing really matters. And there are things we do, but I do think at the end of the day, like keeping in our heads and in our notes, who it matters, who we need to go after. And then we cross-reference it a lot. We're like, here's who we've got right now. Who are we missing? Or who do you want? We're just, it's like reporting. We're always just asking for people's advice and for them to weigh in about who should be there and who we're missing. And yeah.
Would it be through like an email or DM, like, or also like would you send it because you're like the face of your company, like, or would the event person or like the business guy? Or
yeah, I email some people. I send emails, like especially to like we do dinners around some of these events, and I personally invite most of the people to those, or many of the people to those. I mean, I do think my business guy is building his own relationships now at this point, and so an email from him, people who know, and so that's good. And so, but yeah, we're emailing people. We're not doing a lot of like, I've seen there are CEOs who do a good job of like, at once, this email was probably sent by like their chief of staff and it feels personal enough that you like it, but we're not doing a lot of the like sort of fake me emails. They're mostly me, real Eric Newcomer emails.
So I guess like, would you send out like, let's say, hey, blah 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 partner Sequoia, like we're doing this event, like can you give us like a few names of founders that you think is great,
right?
And then you go direct to the founders, or like
like who should we invite? I mean, especially they're coming, right? So like we want, like, we try to limit like, one top GP, two top GPs, like for each firm. So then they're applied. Once they're coming, we're like, oh, by the way, like who are the cool companies that you want to see there, or that you're in your portfolio that we should make sure are there. Sometimes we offer them like, oh, we'll give you a ticket to give out, but yeah, once they're bought in, they're coming. I feel like we're not as worried about like projecting, like we've got it all figured out. It's like, this is sort of, it's a community, it's a collaborative sort of effort. Like, who do you think? And the VCs are professionally, managing their networks and thinking about who matters. So yeah, we just ask for their advice, and some people don't respond, and I don't even think we think about it. I don't know. We don't keep track. It just sort of like, some people do give us their opinion and we're like, great, we'll send some invites.
Okay. So enough about the event. So I feel like your newsletter is great. So, but like, how do you build a news? Like, I feel like I will never have the patience to fact check my words because I'm not a non-English speaker. So like, I'm literally English my second language. So it's like, I feel like writing a bunch of stuff and then you have to fact check. And then like, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this is like too, like, I worry if my opinion is being judged. But like, also that's like a different story event than the growth. Let's talk about the growth.
Okay. I mean, it's hard. Honestly, I think I launched the newsletter at the perfect time. You know, it's during the pandemic when Substack was taking off. And certainly, you know, jumping on a platform when it's taking off is always a good thing.
Right.
And then also during the pandemic, everyone was disconnected. Silicon Valley needed a sense of place while we were all scattered all over the world. So newsletters were super in demand. That was great for me.
Mhm.
Now people want to see each other in person. Some of them have moved to strange places, so they want to come to an event and fly in and know everybody's going to be there. But definitely events, you know, there are sort of tailwinds with events and headwinds with newsletters, and that is what it is. I mean, our Substack has driven a lot of the free growth for our newsletter. Great stories deliver the paid growth, but you know, the weakest part of our business is paid subscription growth. I mean, it's been pretty flat. I'm trying to hire another great reporter. You know, I'd like to see that number improve. To me, you know, paid subscribers are the best measure that people really like value what you're writing. But, you know, it's expensive. We charge $199 a year. I don't think it's like expensive if it's a work expense, but you know, if you're buying it as a consumer, it's expensive. But yeah, that's that. What else can I tell you?
I feel like, is there any strategy that you feel like, because grow something from like 0 to 100K is pretty hard. Like, you know, every day, I mean, every year you have to do like 25K. Yeah, 25K.
I mean, I think great stories are the most important thing. You know, if you write great pieces, then people share them and they grow organically. So definitely write great pieces. I think, you know, when part of the challenge is that Twitter has become a lot worse at directing people to links, which means that it's not as good for newsletters. Like in the old days, like a year ago or 2 years ago, you would, you know, take a screenshot with a link and people will go crazy about one fact in the story. And then you'd be like, there are tons of other facts in this story. I do think it's challenging. I mean, people sort of assume that the stuff that matters is going to get to them, and you need to be on a social feed sort of convincing them that they're actually missing something. But yeah, good stories. We spent some money on Twitter advertising that was okay, but we abandoned it. I'm just not a growth hacker. I'd like to bring in a growth hacker if we're bigger. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask in terms of, besides like worrying about the product. You know, I'm like, we're a product first media company, which is write good stories. I don't think we're a great growth hacker media company. And I think that's a muscle we'll build hopefully at some point. But right now it's very reliant on sort of the quality of the content.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I was gonna pull out your Twitter, but like, okay, so you have a pretty big Twitter following. I'm sorry, like whenever I open any other link, I'm at the CS, like literally the internet will just fall. And I'm so threatened because I don't want our like chat to cut. But okay, so how do you build a Twitter following? Was it from Bloomberg, or like do you feel like it's just your charismatic self?
Yeah, yeah. It's like 40,000 people, I think, which is okay. Depends on where you're coming from. I think scoops drive it. You know, I do think when I have great information that nobody else has, people pay attention. Those are the biggest moments. I mean, I've written some viral, like snarky tweets. I mean, I'm not, you know, I don't really position it well. It is sort of like whatever I'm interested in at the moment.
You know, I think you have a niche. You have to talk about these. Like, I feel like I don't think, okay, so I think there's a lot of great journalists, reporter, yada, yada, yada. But like, not a lot of people actually go off and then build like a $1 million bootstrap business, right? Like, I feel like that's something that you could talk about. That should be your niche.
I know, but I sort of already said that I get self-conscious about talking about myself too much, even though it can be good marketing. I know people do that sort of type of, I feel like I want my brand to be like, I bring you like the news about what's happening in startups and venture capital, or like I'm legitimate. And it's true. I mean, I'm just sort of interested in the stuff that's happening in startups and VC. And, you know, I'm talking about like what's happening. And often, you know, one growth limitation that I think ends up being a strength for the newsletter is I'm very focused on writing for people who already sort of get it. It's like, who Mark Andreessen is, who Bill Gurley is, why we would care about Excel or whatever. It's like, so in some ways I'm intentionally alienating in order to signal to the people who get it that this is a conversation starting from a certain baseline level of sophistication. And then so I'm not totally, optimizing for tweets that would appeal to the broadest audience.
Totally. But I feel like, a niche will grow into something bigger. So it's easier to go from niche to something bigger than like a broad generalist approach to something small. And then even like, I feel like even like the biggest like VC like media properties, like a lot of regular people in tech don't know. Like I would hear people don't know about a certain tier one VC podcast. Like literally, I would walk into like a room of like Google engineers, and they've never heard of it. So it's like,
it takes a lot of work to convince for people to know what you're about. Definitely. I mean, people literally come. It's fine with me. People come to Cerebral Valley and don't necessarily have a full context on Newcomer and what I've been doing. Even your own audience, you do need to sort of hit them over the head with like, what's our story? What have we been about? Like, where are we going? So, and this is why regular CEOs, have the same, 5 stories that they tell about their company over and over again. And it's hard for me to do as a reporter when, my currency is like what's fresh and what's new. But yeah, when talking about Newcomer, you need to hit some of the same points and educate people, and it takes time.
For sure. I also really like your like last name that like
I know
serve as like a term. Okay, so I have another 2 general topic I want to like go through with you. One thing is like what's the vision for your company? Would you say you want to like build it as like a cash flow positive business that you can start off like 5 startups and a VC firm? Like doing the spin-off strategy, or like would you say you want to just grow it into like the bootstrapped like Bloomberg vibe stuff? Are you thinking about doing data stuff, or like what's
I'm 100% focused on startups and venture capital. Like I think I've been really fortunate to cover the private markets at a time where the private markets have become more and more important, and tech is the most important thing going, certainly I think, for my lifetime. So definitely staying there. I think some media companies let their brands drift, and I just want to stay laser focused. This year is the year of events, build sort of an event for like every partner at a VC firm. It's like, you're the health tech VC, you should be going to a Newcomer event. You're a fintech VC, you should be going to a Newcomer event. Obviously, AI is a theme that sort of cuts across industries, but we think there's appetite for sort of these more sector specific elite events where we're getting 50% startup founders, a quarter VCs, elite media, sort of a world where you can't have one tech conference to roll them all. There's no code. And so, yeah. So events are the thesis for this year. I could see us having a data strategy down the line. I need this. I've written about this on LinkedIn, but I do like the smallest of small angel investing in friends, but it's just like literally my friends. But it's not a business, and I don't really investing. I don't think is on the immediate horizon. It's a cliche, but we're sort of picks and shovels in some ways, safer business. But yeah, I just want to keep growing. I want to build a stronger team of startups and venture capital reporters, build more events, and sort of figure out other business lines that target people and startups and VC.
I wonder, so like like you mentioned like picks and shovels, and like, but I feel like, do you feel like VCs are making money, or like is there, since like I feel like there's a lot of like, obviously the ACNZ of the world, like everybody's like turning VC firm into a media platform, vice versa, or like you see 20 VC have a big fund. So how do you think about like creating a strong media brand that can pivot into venture capital, or do you feel like that's like kind of like too much work, just because I feel like each person have to focus on their own like strength to like
for me, I think our brand is very much like independent, neutral between VCs, skeptical, sort of saying what we think. 20 VC, credit to Harry, he's been sort of a little more, he's pro whoever he's interviewing. And it's, not that he doesn't ask hard questions, but it is a sort of generally positive product. It fits a little bit more with like the public messaging that a venture firm would have. So I think, the challenge with creating content for someone who wants to do VC is you have to sort of serve two masters, right? You need to create content that's good enough while not necessarily offending everybody that you'd ever want to work with. And it's nice for us to not have to worry about the never offending everybody you'd have to work with part. And I think it gives you an advantage in creating great content. But yeah, I mean, I think this stuff is all collapsing. I mean, clearly collapsing onto itself. Clearly I'm a reporter who is fine selling sponsorships and integrating the editorial side and the business. We want to write what's true and fair regardless of who our sponsors are, but we're not sort of constructing the same old school barriers because, like you're saying, we see on one end of our competition is literal people who are trying to hype investment funds and like couldn't be more conflicted. If All In is the top podcast in tech and they're constantly talking their book with no disclosure. And then on the other hand, it's like this super paranoid media universe. We're somewhere in between where it's like, well, we're not going to like fight with our arms tied behind our backs relative to people who are like no conflict, no interest.
What's your thought on hiring? So like, would you say like, so you mentioned like the first, I know that you guys hired an intern, like writing intern, and then there's like someone who's like, doing you're doing the podcast with, and then there's like a sales for the ads. Like, who would you say should be like the first hire looking back?
Yeah. So, I mean, my first hire was this guy, Riley, who joined as my chief of staff. He wrote me like an essay about how I was excited about the newsletter and the opportunity. I love the enthusiasm. He was also willing to take like a salary that was heavily based on upside. I think like the strategy he outlined wasn't the strategy we ended up pursuing. I don't think neither of us really were like, oh, it's going to be events. But once we hit on events, he really excelled and sort of moved from like a chief of staff to sort of doing some of the sponsorships, dealing with a lot of like who the people are. So that became super valuable. We brought on a full-time reporter, Madeline, in January. She was the second full-time hire. And that's been great because, we just need more consistent content. Like as I'm getting pulled into this sort of booking and event hosting and relationship building outside of just my reporting, need sort of the backbone editorial stuff. So Madeline's been great for that. She's co-hosting a podcast with me. And then, I've been really fortunate to have like a part-time editor. He's writing a book. So he's more senior than I probably would have gotten in a normal circumstance, but he wants like a cool sort of part-time job. So that's been great. We have a events person who works with us for every event, but we just contract sort of one-off. And so, it's just sort of, I think we've been too slow. I mean, we wish right now we had hired an account executive and a senior reporter, but, it's just a matter of, you have to figure it out. So, I do think, one thing is that since we haven't been venture backed, sort of intentional, there was a reason to be, I've been slower, we've been more thoughtful. We don't have quite this, even though we're growing like pretty well, but we're not like sort of, we need to like run as fast as we can. And, be partially because we don't want to accidentally like start burning more money than we need to. So yeah, we want to hire more people. I think this is the year that Newcomer becomes more of an operation and a little less ragtag. And man, this is like the first year where like every passing day feels like, oh my God, we need every day we can get this year. It's really flipping the head on like, I don't think I'm like I take my weekends off, but it's definitely like, I want every work day I can get at this point because there's a lot we need to get done this year to meet our goals.
What, I guess, like, how do you attract Riley to join you? Just because I feel like attracting the talents is very different than like, you can have like a million audience, but like you need that one person to like.
Yeah, you need the one person. I mean, I was sort of lucky, but I mean, there were other people. That's sort of, at once, like my power is that I have this like email newsletter that goes to super important people's inboxes. So I get in front of people. But then, yeah, at the end of the day, even so, you're looking for one person who syncs just right at the right moment. And so sometimes it's just getting the word out, and other times you have to chase after people. I don't know. We're like a 3 full-time person in company, including me. So I don't know if you want to come to me for your hiring advice.
No, I think like honestly, building a small team and then using AI to do the rest is kind of the way to. I feel
Interesting. Are you using AI a lot?
I think everyone use AI. Don't you use AI? You just mentioned
I said that for my to-do list. Yeah.
I don't like. I think like you cannot use AI. Like even you drop an email, then you're superhuman. Like AI, like kind of rewrites it for you. Like it's like, do you consider using AI? I feel like it's kind of like a tool anyway,
Yeah.
or like camera and stuff. I wonder, how do you think about? I feel like I have like audience that are like amazing audience. Like they're like they would like wake up 2 a.m. to like be in our like group chats. But I think like it's very different than like you find the right person at the right skill that you need. Like how do you kind of filter out like obviously he wrote like the strategy for you, but like were you telling the audience that like, hey, I'm like hiring a full-time person and like or
yeah, I told them I was looking for a chief of staff. It was full-time. I posted the salary. I mean, with him, I just sort of lucked out that he was able to grow into the role. He seemed I hired him, because he was hungry, and he saw the newsletters were like a good sort of, I don't know, tip of the spear to get into sort of more business. And I think there are a lot of people, some of the candidates we've talked to for different roles see that media, while not traditionally like a good business, is like actually has a lot of advantages, and that you build a ton of relationships. It's like a good marketing engine for other products. And so I do think there are people who see, oh, actually working in media is a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't know. We're still figuring it out. I don't feel like I've solved this problem.
do you think about like other competitive business that's in the space, but like they're like focusing on events? Do you think about like like how to differentiate yourself all day, or like do you feel like you just have absolutely no competitor just because you got the best
No,
people?
there are lots of, we love the information, but, we serve somewhat overlapping audiences. They had an AI event. There's like a huge conference that I'm going to speak at next year or this year that is AI. Everybody's running in. We were early. There's literally, a Cerebral Valley networking group that we have to constantly, I don't know, that we are not affiliated with. Yeah, I think you just have to do the thing you're doing well, not sort of worry about the competition. You worry about the competition when you're setting the dates of your events so that they're not all on top of each other. But ultimately, like there are probably enough people to do
Everything.
5 Cerebral Valleys. You know what I mean? Or it's like, even if we succeed and like we got like the best startup founders, best speakers, we only have, we have one great investor slot speaker and one great, I bet you could do at least 1 or 2 other Cerebral Valleys with like a, mirror version. Like, oh, they were great, but instead of this person, instead of the Anthropic CEO, you had, Cohere's CEO or whatever, So anyway, there's plenty of opportunity to put on a great event, get great people there. I don't worry about the competition too much. Yeah.
How was the Cerebral Valley partnership kind of partner? Like since you brought everything, you brought the speaker, you brought the
What's Volley's involvement, you're asking? Or
so oh sorry, it's called Valley. So like I think
Volley. So Cerebral
Valley
newsletter,
right?
So Cerebral Valley is, I am unaffiliated with the Cerebral Valley networking group. We're the Cerebral Valley AI Summit. So like that group has nothing to do with us. Basically, it was a name that like Amber at Bloomberg Beta helped popularize, and unclear how to merge. It's literally like what people call Hayes Valley. Nobody owns it. They created a networking group. We created an event like around the same time. Like we use a newcomer to differentiate. So nothing to do with Cerebral Valley. My partners, who are very important, are Volley, the company that my best friends run. They provided us the first event space. They literally co-host the event. They get speakers. They're, Yeah, so they're super involved, and we co-host the event together, and like they basically provide, they provide a lot of advice. They help host the event, they moderate panels, they have they do some design work, and yeah, we deal with like the sponsorships. It's really like our business. In some ways, they're like, they're a co-host. It's a unique relationship. Everybody says like, don't do business with friends, and I'm just like, do business with friends that you trust, like, and respect, and that's been sort of the relationship with Volley.
Amazing. Okay, I want to be mindful of the time. I want to wrap up with like a 1 minute fire round. Okay, what's your favorite book?
Favorite book? Oh man, I feel like A Prayer for Owen Meany has been my go-to answer. I'm reading No Country for Old Men at the moment. Yeah.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Well, I mean, Bill Tribble, the guy in the 5th grade elementary school newscast, and then Jessica Lesson for getting me into tech reporting in the first place. And Brad Stone at Bloomberg was super essential.
You literally just name drop two of the biggest tech reporter and your high school, or your like elementary school teacher. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? Well, I host dinner parties. I think it really depends on the theme. I mean, I think my favorite dinner parties are, with my friends. Like, I feel like I have a good group of friends. So I don't know, that would be the answer. My professional dinner parties, I think it's really about, getting people who have sort of shared interests, who are working hard and really doing something new at the moment. So always excited to have startup founders.
Who actually, where can we find you outside of work?
So, it's the website is newcomer.co. That's the Substack. That's our way to find everything. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Newcomer. Where we post the Cerebral Valley videos on YouTube. But yeah, subscribe to the Substack, and that's the channel through which everything is delivered.
Amazing. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming to the show today.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.